Greetings, good people. Welcome to Who Knows, It's Just Life, the podcast. I'm your host, Kyle. Thank you for fitting me into your day today. This episode is called Patriarchy Strikes Back. And I'm going to get into patriarchy a bit. And I'm also going to speak about Bell Hooks and her impact on my life and kind of commemoration of her since we lost her last week, which was definitely sad for many of us to hear. First, some updates. So we're coming into the holiday season, about to hit Christmas and Kwanzaa and the New Year and everything. And COVID is literally just going crazy. This Omicron variant is nuts. And I'm joking with the name, but as one of my buddies was like, come on, man, you're an engineer. You should know all the Greek alphabet. I'm like, most variables and most formulas didn't go out that far. So I'm not very good at saying Omicron, but whatever. Anyway, this variant is nuts. Clearly, it's way more contagious than anything we've seen before in terms of COVID or probably anything else. And I guess the good news is it seems like a lot of the symptoms are a lot more mild. People seem to be feeling more like it's the regular, like a mild flu or cold with like a sore throat and stuff like that. So, and I'm not sure if that's because we're all vaccinated or for those who are vaccinated, I'm not sure if that's because folks are vaccinated or if it's just not as much of a crippling thing as other variants that we've been experiencing. So, but anyway, the fact that it seems like everybody has it, or I know a ton of people that have it or have recently gotten over it. A lot of people I know are canceling their plans for the holidays coming up because they're just coming down with it and whatnot. And so I guess, what this raised the question for me in my mind, because I remember when COVID first came out, it was called the novel coronavirus, which, I think I haven't heard any different. It's still applicable. And obviously novel meaning that it's new. The human race has not experienced this version, this strain before. And so we're susceptible to it and it happens to be harmful, right? And so I guess my question is basically, when does a virus officially become not novel? And I don't have a scientific answer for that. I'm sure that the answer exists somewhere. I haven't even researched it all that much, but I'm thinking in my head like, okay, does this variant, does the fact that it seems like it's hitting everybody, is that going to help us get to this non-novel status of COVID? And is it going to hopefully relegate itself into more of a manageable, not life-threatening, non-global pandemic, circumstance? I don't know. And that's just kind of a question that's bubbled up for me. Another thing I want to shout out is that I attended a concert. I actually attended a few concerts recently, and I guess I'm going to chill on that with the variant like going crazy for sure. But I was able to go to the Leslie Odom Jr. concert in Baltimore with my mom for Christmas. He's made a couple of Christmas albums, best known for being in Hamilton. He was also in One Night in Miami, that movie I talked about earlier in the year on the show. And so anyway, I love him. He's an amazingly talented singer and whatnot. But anyway, my mom loves his Christmas music and loved Hamilton as well. So I took her to see him along with the Baltimore Symphony Orchestra up in Baltimore. The associate conductor there, Jonathan Rush, is amazing. He was also a good entertainer, fun to watch him as well. So yeah, that was just a total treat. The symphony orchestra was amazing. Hearing Leslie Odom Jr. and his band backed by the symphony was just unparalleled, unmatched. Like, it was just an amazing performance. He did a couple songs from Hamilton. He also did stand up. I think it was which was the original track he made for One Night in Miami. He also sung A Change Is Gonna Come. On some sneak stuff. The guitar player was playing like a solo, which was amazing. And then he just hit it with I Was Born by the River. And it was just like, wow, he just blew us away. The Christmas songs were cool. And if I'm being honest, like, I was kind of like, the Christmas season was not really, I wasn't really feeling it as much this year as I have in the past. Usually I'm organized with like gifts I'm getting for people and whatnot. And with my boy, like we plan out like who we getting stuff for and whatnot. And we ended up doing that, but it didn't seem the same. It didn't feel as, I don't know, it wasn't flowing for me as much for whatever reason. But that show that was, just Friday. That just kind of brought me there. So I'm thankful for that show. But I also went to a couple other shows. I saw Toby and Wingway perform. That show was fire. I also saw her perform. She was also amazing. So I'm on Instagram. I posted a flashback back in February because the last concert I had been to was Michael Kiwanuka before COVID. And so, these three, thankfully, I've been able to go to a few concerts in recent history. And I'm very thankful for that. I love music, love seeing it live. So, seeing those three was definitely a pleasure. And I guess I'm probably not going to go to a concert for a while because, again, this is, COVID's continuing to rear its ugly head. So yeah, as soon as we start to feel like we're comfortable or whatever. Another thing I want to mention as far as updates is that I read Ready Player One, which is a book that came out, I want to say like maybe 10, 11 years ago. And it came up because in Urban Temple and and with other folks, it was the movie was recommended to me at least on like 3 occasions. And that all happened within like 48 hours. I was like, all right, like I need to actually like, and I was going to just watch the movie, but then my buddy Kenny was like, no, read the book first. And of course I love reading. So I prefer to read the books, before I watch the show or movie anyway. So finished the book and it was great. Like I really like the concept. Obviously is just terrifyingly similar to where we are now, or at least you can very easily see us getting down that path, especially with metaverse and all this kind of stuff. I mean, the kids, if anybody with kids knows Roblox and Minecraft and all these like games where we have an avatar and, you can talk to people, meet people, whatever. Like, I mean, all of that is like in the works right now. And so the idea that in 2044, climate change is taking a hit and, a lot of folks are unemployed, underemployed, crime and blah, blah, blah. Like politics don't matter anymore because just world, it's basically like, dystopian setting, whatever. And everybody's real life is basically in this Oasis game. And so, that whole premise is really, really jarring because we're so, that future is so palatable for us right now, which is sad, really. And the book itself is entertaining. I mean, it's definitely, if you love 80s pop culture and whatnot, like, it's definitely a nostalgic bit of work from that perspective. I was born in the late 80s, so I didn't catch a whole lot of the references, although I being somewhat of a nerdy kid, like in the 90s and whatnot, I got some of the references, but it wasn't exactly my generation of stuff to like understand from like just a cultural familiarity piece, but the book was still entertaining. Like the whole gamification of it was cool, and just the juxtaposition from people's actual real lives versus how they personified themselves in the game was fun to see. It was cool. It was a fun adventure, and I definitely enjoyed the book. Have not seen the movie yet though, so my homework now is to actually see the movie and see how it compares. Hopefully, it won't be too disappointing. And like with Queen Sugar, hopefully I can appreciate both versions as they are. I know earlier in the year I mentioned how I struggled to watch Queen Sugar because it was so different in some key ways from the book. But anyway, yeah. So Ready Player One was definitely fun, and particularly relevant given metaverse and everything everybody's talking about these days. So one of the main things I want to talk about in this episode is patriarchy. This is something that I am in the position of privilege in in terms of this topic, and I need to challenge myself, decolonize my own thinking, and deconstruct my patriarchal thinking as every day. That's a daily effort, right, to do that. And it's work that white people need to do in terms of racism as well, right? They need to deconstruct their privilege in terms of whiteness and that whole racial construct. And being a black person, like it's I'm the one saying, oh, white people need to do this work. With respect to patriarchy and sexism and all of that, I'm the one that needs to do that work because I need to identify where patriarchy benefits me and figure out what I can do to raise a son that is divested from patriarchy and is not perpetuating patriarchal masculinity and other things that are obviously harmful and detrimental, not only to women, but to society at large. And the queer community, LGBTQIA community as well. Like, I mean, the patriarchy literally targets everyone to one degree or another, but obviously women and homophobia and transphobia are also huge byproducts of patriarchy as well. So, so anyway, this is a topic that my heart has always, been aware that this was an issue, but I didn't necessarily know how to behave, how to act in a non-patriarchal way. And I still don't. I'm still learning that, as the show is. Who knows? It's just life. I'm still learning that. And I always welcome anybody to point out anything that I've done or said that is problematic to that end, because I need to learn those lessons and grow from that and change from that. And I'm ready to do that work. And I'll go back in time. I remember I was talking to my sister. I don't know. My family randomly does, dinners. Like, my sister and my brother have lived in different parts of the country and different parts of the world here and there. So this was probably like 5 to 10 years ago. I don't even know when this was, but some random family dinner, maybe everybody was back in town for the first time in a while or something like that. I don't know. But I remember asking my sister, like, hey, like, what can I as a man do in terms of like feminism, womanism, like whatever? And she was like, read a book, Google it. And she said it so flatly and so like whatever. I was upset by it, but obviously, like, that's as a Black person, I'm like, I feel that way about white people. And so while in the moment, it was like, damn, like, like I just felt like, oh man, come on, like, can't you help me out? But she wasn't wrong to respond that way. And it took me a second to be like, okay, yeah, no, she is definitely within her right to not have to answer that question. And yeah, I can Google, I can read and whatnot. So shortly after that, I started at least Googling stuff and whatever, starting reading articles and whatnot. But I really got into both Audre Lorde and Bell Hooks, I guess, at some point down the line of getting into those types of into those topics. And obviously, those are just two authors, Mickey Kendall as well. Those are just a few. Actually, Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie too. I mean, so there's a few that I've dug into. But Bell Hooks is obviously one of the most revered, most well known, authors and thinkers around feminism, womanism, and all that, especially from a Black perspective, from a Black queer perspective, all those things. So, hearing that she passed last week was sad news, of course. I mean, she has had such an impact, and I'm thankful for her. I'm thankful for the life that she had and the impact that she's had, not only on me, but on so many other people. And, I know she's not perfect, right? Nobody's perfect. I know, I'm aware that there's some criticism of her, and that's fine. I'm not even familiar with all the details, but I'm happy to talk about them if I read about it and if somebody wants to have that discussion about, things that she said that either are or aren't on par with whatever we need to be doing. I'm ready to have that conversation. This episode, I'm really just going to reflect on how I received her work. And I'll start with Feminism is for Everybody, which I read and I'll say listened to maybe 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago. And now Bell Hooks, I'll say I was familiar with Bell Hooks back in college. I read parts of her works back then. And I don't know that I've read any. I know that I hadn't read any complete books of hers until very recently. So that starts with Feminism is for Everyone, which was a couple years ago. And I know there was a part of that book where she talked about feminist masculinity, and that whole book was helpful and meaningful to me. But that phrase stuck out to me because that was essentially what I was asking my sister about those years ago. And I was like, I need more on that. Like, what is feminist masculinity? What is it about masculinity that is good and pure and right? And how does that balance femininity in a healthy way? And how is it that masculine and feminine energies can be acted upon and, lived with like in healthy ways? And so both on my own, but also through the Let's Talk Bruh book club, which took place over the course of, like, I guess from the fall of last year to into the spring and actually into the summer of 2021. They actually had Bell Hooks' The Will to Change as one of the books for their book club. And so I know it had been on my list, but I can't remember if I read it just for the book club or if I had already read it recently. I can't remember the exact order, but So I was really excited to not only have that book and have read that book, but also to be able to have the ability to talk about that with the Let's Talk About Book Club. That book was basically a much more detailed dive into how patriarchy negatively impacts men and how men can, start to work against patriarchy in various ways. But the majority of the book is really about how harmful it is, how men have to perform, how, it breeds into homophobia, transphobia, things like that, which I really encourage men to listen to read. Again, I listened to the audiobook, but either to consume this book in some way, shape, form, or fashion, because it starts the conversation with yourself, maybe first and foremost, about what's your relationship to masculinity, what's your relationship to manhood. And those are two distinct things. One is the gender identity, one is just the energy source of just masculine energy and how that relates to your feminine energy. I think most people, if they're honest with themselves, have masculine and feminine energies within them. And that's natural. Like we have that balance. And so I think there's kind of been a knee-jerk reaction to the term toxic masculinity. And I think a lot of people are reacting that way because they're feeling like masculinity is being called toxic. And that's not the intention. That's not what people are trying to say. What Bell Hooks would say is that there's patriarchal masculinity, which has toxic traits. It takes things about masculinity and exacerbates them, exploits them, and it makes them harmful and problematic to women and the LGBTQIA community as direct victims of it. But it's also harmful to men too, in the sense that we are unable to express and experience our feelings in a way that's healthy and helpful to us. And it is also it forces us to perform and to act in these ways that are really unnatural to the vast majority of us. It's really to all of us. And so anyway, The Will to Change was a beautiful book for me, and I've recommended it to a few other fellas, and a couple of them have read it, and we've had some really good discussions from it as well. So I really appreciated Bell Hooks' work in both of those books, and I've even watched a couple of videos and read some other lectures of hers, and I'm just really thankful and appreciative of her and her work, and I don't know, I'm sad to hear that she passed away. And I hope she rests in peace. And I hope that, her passing is a reminder to those who maybe hadn't heard about her, that, to check into her work, to plug in and to really tap into what she was talking about, and, take what's valuable and think about what she was talking about and compare that to your own lived experience and other things that you've read and move forward. Because really patriarchy is damaging, it's harmful, it's hurtful, and it's got victims everywhere. And we really need to figure out a way to peel that back, to heal the traumas that patriarchy has inflicted, both on everybody. Like I know grown men who still have nightmares about either their father or an uncle or a grandfather or somebody who essentially terrorized them as a boy. Or at least just like imposed upon them a certain idea of masculinity, a certain idea of manhood that's traumatizing to them. And these are grown men old enough to be my dad, old enough to be me, old enough to be my grandparents. Like there are people that I know that have really struggled, men that have really struggled with this notion of masculinity that patriarchy has put up on a pedestal. But yeah, at the end of the day, we need to really get rid of this patriarchal concept and really get back to honoring women, honoring femininity, and just healing all of the traumas that patriarchy has inflicted on femininity and masculinity. So yes, rest in peace, Bell Hooks. I sincerely love and appreciate you. So I called this episode Patriarchy Strikes Back. And I did that because I wanted to highlight a work scenario that I heard about recently that I'm fairly familiar with. And it really just shows how alive patriarchy is, even in somewhat progressive work cultures and somewhat progressive industries and things like that. And it really blew me. It shook me personally, just because you see a lot of progress. You see a lot of banners anyway about like, you see Black Lives Matter stuff. You see, pride stuff. You see a lot of people trying to have women in leadership and whatnot. And all those things look good and can feel good if the culture is really there for that. That's a second step. But at least they look good, right? And so a lot of companies are doing this type of thing, and so we're kind of given the poster board vision of what progress should look like, I guess. But this example just is a humbling piece of pie that patriarchy is still kicking women down. And so I'll get into a little bit. I know some details about this situation, but I also have to use some analysis just to kind of project a little bit. So I hope you'll forgive me when I do that. But I think it's still an interesting example to look at. So there was this company that basically is a fairly young company. It's a startup, and it had a woman CEO, and this woman essentially built the team, and the culture of the company, from what I understand, is actually family friendly in the way that a lot of companies say they're family friendly, but this one was family friendly in the sense that, like, it was flexible. Everybody worked remotely. Taking an hour block away to handle kids stuff or whatever was cool. Similar to many other startups that had like unlimited PTO and stuff like that. So it had a lot of those cultural things that make folks feel valued and feel like they can bring their whole selves to work. And I think that's kind of what brings the most out of people from a productivity standpoint, when you give them the trust and the freedom to be their full selves in terms of their responsibilities and stuff like that. So that's kind of what I've looked for in my recent career in my recent career endeavors, and I could just tell, like, this company seemed to have those types of things that would make somebody enjoy working there or whatever. So over the brief history of this company, a woman CEO had the faith and trust of the board to build this team and staff it, set the culture, and all that, which as I said, from what I can see, the culture is a culture that gets value out of people. It really it gets full engagement, like I said. So all that was in the works, all that was happening. And again, this is like, a very, it's an energy space. It's a company that has, a strong mission in terms of just environmentalism and energy and stuff like that. So, progressive goals in terms of that, and progressive leadership, progressive work culture, all those types of things. And so all those things you think are going well, right? But basically what happened was this happens to be a company that has a couple of international pieces as well. So there was a global leader in this company, and across from that global perspective and across other levels of the senior management, there evidently were some management issues, and so a consultant was brought in to kind of work on some of those management issues. And within 2 months of this man's involvement, and this guy was closely tied into the board. The board handpicked this particular individual to help with the situation from just like a management perspective. And I think the impression was originally that it was a consultant role to kind of help, teach or coach the leadership into some, better situation or whatever. I'm not privy to all the details there, but that was the impression. That's what I've learned. That's what I gleaned from what I know about that. What ended up happening is this consultant, who has, again, a prior relationship with the board, dismisses the woman CEO. And to me, it's preposterous to think that a woman who had the runway and the trust and the faith to build a team over this entire time gets less respect and less support than a man that's only been exposed to the company for a couple of months. And to me, that is one piece of that's one piece of evidence that shows that, again, that whole good old boy network goes so far. And despite all those other things about the culture, the industry, blah, 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 no matter how progressive you want to say any of that stuff is, at the end of the day, that white male connection, that white male privilege is what dictates the moves. And so, I don't know, to me that just is hella unfortunate and problematic. Now, also, what I've learned about the situation is that there were other men in the C-suite, And when the reasonings for the woman CEO's termination came about, it was about, it wasn't performance based, but it was about about the ability to work with this person and stuff like that. And some of the things that were being said about that person were not true. If they were true about anybody, they were true about some of the other men on the C-suite. It sounds like there's a different standard for a woman than there are for men. And that's the second piece of evidence to me that says, much less than just the connections and the time frame, the expectations are different. And so, when you think about a glass ceiling, when you think about all those things, this is just an example where it seems like those things are absolutely still true. And to me, it's just extremely frustrating to think that that's still the case. And maybe I shouldn't be that frustrated by it because, again, a lot of the poster board portrayals of progress, starting with President Obama, starting with, wherever other times you see a black or a woman or whatever CEO or whatnot, a lot of times a lot of times when you dig into the weeds of it, the culture doesn't necessarily fit the postcard picture. And, unfortunately, the postcard picture couldn't even last with this particular company for very long because the board just, I guess, the board and the consultant dude or whatever, they couldn't take it, and the expectations being what they were, like it just a woman CEO was just impossible. And we have work to do. We have work to do. And another thing that comes to mind when I think of these scenarios is the term imposter syndrome, because as a black person going through engineering school at a predominantly white institution and being an engineer in a predominantly white company in an energy space, which was the case for years in my early career, you have that notion of imposter syndrome, where it's like, do I really belong here? Like there's probably people here that don't think I deserve to be here. They think I might be here because of affirmative action and for no other reason. And, so you sometimes you just feel like you have that extra burden, that extra weight of like, do people know that I've earned to be here or do I really deserve to be here, kinds of things. And so I just hate to think that in a moment like what happened at this company, for the woman who got dismissed, it's like, I can only guess, but I'm sure there's thoughts and feelings of imposter syndrome, like, oh, like who like could, in terms of who am I to think I could have been a CEO and run this company, but at the end of the day, again, from my perspective and what I've learned about the situation, absolutely she could, and it was working, and the team was moving and shaking and doing all the things that they were supposed to be doing, and from what I can tell, that's the culture I would work for. That's a team I would work for. That's a person I would work for. That's what I would look for in an employment situation. So, I hate to think that she would feel any sense of imposter syndrome having that be her experience. But that's what that whole glass ceiling thing does, and that's what that oppression does to women in this case, to black people, to anybody who's been oppressed economically from a career standpoint, and that's just such a debilitating experience to go through, and I feel sorry for her, and I feel sorry for anybody who has gone through a situation like that, and the ubiquity and the frequency with which those experiences happen are just a reminder that I guess this shouldn't be frustrating to me. This shouldn't really be news to me, I guess, but it is. I don't know. It is. It just sucks. So the challenge is this: what do we do about it? What do we do about it? How do we deconstruct patriarchy? How do we prevent these things from happening? And I know there's micro versions, there's micro ways, small ways we can do that, right? So like I have a kid, I have a son, and I have to live my own life in a way that is as non-patriarchal as I can, and to exhibit, positive forms of masculinity in a healthy way that shows that shows that it can equally balance feminine energy, whether that's within my own body or or with folks that have more feminine energy than I do, and make sure that I am interacting with that energy in a healthy way, and modeling that for my son, and allowing him the freedom to experience his masculine and feminine energies and let them come to fruition in a healthy way, and then also teaching him how to interact with those energies with other people in a healthy way too, and to not, have any kind of patriarchal masculine, traits, and not to perpetuate that culture and that toxicity. So, and that's the challenge. And I can think of examples of where my own son has had said some problematic things, and at his age, it's like, okay, he didn't get that from my house. Where did he get that from? Like, what happened? Did somebody say that at school? Like, where is this coming from? And that's the thing. School is a crazy place. Like, I think I'm grateful that the kids are back in school for the most part. I know, at least my son's school has done it in a safe way. To my knowledge, there hasn't been any issues with COVID. And so I'm glad that they've been able to do it effectively and safely, because the students need that interaction. I think I know my son in particular needs to be able to be challenged in his thinking, but he also needs to be exposed to the way other people think, other children think. And I appreciate when he comes home and says some off the wall stuff, because then I can be like, oh, okay. And try to dispel that. So, like, for example, like he was into Godzilla, and he just assumed Godzilla was a boy. And I'm like, well, how'd you know Godzilla was a boy? And he would say some things, but then he was also like, well, Godzilla laid an egg or something. I don't know, some movie from like the 80s. I don't know. Where he's saying that Godzilla laid an egg. So maybe maybe Godzilla isn't a boy. And so I kind of use that as an example, as an opening to kind of challenge the idea of gender, challenge the idea of sex, and all those types of things. Godzilla is obviously a made up monster, so it could be whatever the heck. I mean, Godzilla isn't it, as far as I'm concerned. It's just interesting to see how young people are conditioned to see gender, to see sex, and the interactions between the sexes, and masculine, feminine energies, etc. One thing I'm proud of him. I got him some masks, for school, and some of them are like different colors, and one of them is a little bit more purpley and pink colors. And a kid in school said, "Oh, those are girl colors," and he's like, "No, there aren't girl colors." And I was like, I'm glad he said that. So, and he had confidence to say that, which is great. So there's a good example. It's a small example, but that's good. I think that's one way of like deconstructing patriarchy, and just the micro work, just the small examples. I am a mansplainer. I've done it before. I like talking. I have a podcast. I like talking. I like explaining about things. I like sharing things that I know and that I've learned, and I like being honest. I like sharing what I'm learning, and acknowledging that it's messy and squishy and not always clear. And that's what this podcast is about, right? It's about just learning and expressing that. Sometimes that makes me a mansplainer, because I explain stuff that doesn't need to be explained. And I there's been plenty of women in my life who pointed it out to me. I used to resist it. I was like, oh, no. I used to deny it, whatever. And that was problematic and not helpful. But I'm trying to be better at not mansplaining in the first place. But when I'm called out about it, saying, you're right, I'm sorry, I apologize, like that, you're right. And just acknowledging it and packing it in, So there's lots of examples of just that daily work of trying to not be patriarchal in your masculinity, and to try to, find those healthy ways of interacting in the world, from a masculine, feminine energy standpoint. For the macro situations, though, I don't know what to do. I really don't. Because like in this particular situation, there's a board of directors. They got the money. And they got the good old boy networks who also got the money. And it's like, I guess, I don't know. There's power in people, right? So, you can organize and do stuff like that to try to get people with money to shift their minds and whatever. And those types of movements have had impact, and that there's been good successes with that too. So I'm not saying that's not an option, because it is. It's but it's a tough hill to climb though, and it's work that we all need to get done, and it's work that takes a lot of organization and patience, and I'm here for it. I want to be a part of that. I want to do that work as well. And I don't know. I guess it's frustrating to me because, you know, if you look at the civil rights movement, you look at major events that have taken place, you know, Black people made the civil rights happen by civil disobedience, by activism, by funding boycotts and stuff like that. But the only way the civil rights movement actually became official is with the signature of a white man. Kennedy, Johnson, they had to actually sign the laws into place. The actual power was still in the hands of a white man. And Dr. King could be that right there with, you know, for the picture, and he can get the pen. But the man that had to sign that was a man and a white man. And that's to me that's the frustrating part about all this, because hell yeah, there's power in people. Like, Black and brown people outnumber white people. You know, women outnumber men, and so there's power in people. So that there's a lot of ability with that if it's organized, and if we are united, and if we know what we want, we know what the challenges are, and stuff like that. And it's obviously it's hard to organize and galvanize around those things, but at the end of the day, we got to convince white men that this shit needs to change. And they're the ones privileged. They're the ones benefiting from it the most. They're the ones most privileged by it. And that's, it's just frustrating how much work that sounds like. I don't know. Maybe I'm just having a moment right now and just being a little frustrated about that. In my day to day, I swear I'm optimistic. I really want to make this work happen. I want to make it happen. And I believe we can. I really do. I really do believe we can. Maybe just in this moment, I guess I was knocked down a peg, I guess. That company situation, you know, was humbling to me. And so, yeah, that's why I call this episode Patriarchy Strikes Back. Cause it just, you know, in a space where you might think that, you know, there's a woman leader and things are, you know, changing, things are moving forward in a progressive way. Boom. Not the case there. And, yeah, so that's a little discouraging, but anyway, I believe we can get better. I believe this work happens. I believe with study of the works of Bell Hooks and others, and just conversation and allowing ourselves to be humble and understand that our experiences are our experiences, but there's a context to those experiences, you know, and allowing others to express their experiences and understand the context of their experiences and see how those fit together, see how, you know, the systems that in place have influenced those experiences and even how we've responded to them. You know, I think that's how we move forward. So that's a wrap for this episode. Before I go, I'm going to let you know the song I've been rocking to, which, you know, I think my homeboy originally sent it to me on TikTok as like a little clip. And I'm going to be honest, I haven't even heard the full song until literally just minutes before I started recording this show. But it's the DJ who goes by the name of Sickick, I guess, Sickick. I'm not sure how it's pronounced verbally. But he did a mashup of Michael Jackson's Remember the Time and Phil Collins' In the Air Tonight. And I love those songs. Like, since I was at, like, I remember the time I was listening to when I was like in elementary school. Phil Collins, I wasn't hip to him like that young, but definitely by high school, I was hip to In the Air Tonight and a bunch of other Phil Collins work. So this dude's mashup of those two songs is a freaking work of art. And I have been rocking to that. And I'm glad I was just like, man, I've only heard clips of this, but I'm really rocking to this song. Like, and I haven't even heard the whole thing. So I literally just heard it for the first time on YouTube, literally just minutes ago. So, yeah, shout out to that brother for doing that. Like that, and he even sung in the middle of it. I didn't even know that was part of it, but he like, you know, the beat breaks in there, the way he sliced it up conversationally between Phil and Michael. Like, man, that song is just literally, I already said it, it's a work of art. It's a work of art, and DJs don't get enough credit, you know, for what they do. And this brother, like, he completely nailed it on this. And I've looked at some of his other work too. He's a talented dude. He definitely has a lot of good work out there. This particular piece, definitely my favorite from what I've heard so far. But yeah. So anyway, the song I'm rocking to right now is the "I Can Feel It" Michael Jackson and Phil Collins remix by Sickick. All right, so that's this episode of Who Knows It's Just Life. I'm your host, Kyle. Thank you for fitting me into your day to day. As always, you can find me on Instagram at RealDadult. That's RealDadult. I look forward to hearing your feedback about this show or any prior shows, and let me know if you have any ideas for upcoming episodes. Hope to catch you here next time. Until then, be safe, be well. Peace.